Okay, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Bambergate, which is the channel that deals with the framing of Jeremy Bamber and the cover-up by the British government in terms of the most important case in the justice system today, and helps you understand the reasons behind that, and hopefully at the end maybe helps us move towards a solution that works for both parties. This episode is about the maybe helicopter view of the case in terms of the economic aspects, which I've never read anything about online. I don't think anybody else is aware of these, so hopefully you will find this one interesting and thought-provoking, and will give you a deeper understanding of what the real issues are around the case. Okay, so just as a backdrop, I'm, among other things, a qualified financial advisor. In England, I've worked as a financial planner, financial advisor, independent financial advisor. I worked in banking, and I worked in offshore tax advice as an offshore introducer. I had a small property business, and I emigrated to another country. As you know, I should know by now, I don't live in England, although I'm British. And I emigrated at a time that I felt there was some economics problem coming. Now, I used to work for the Royal Bank of Scotland, and some of you who have followed the great 2008 economic crisis will know that the Royal Bank of Scotland was fairly at the centre of that, and still is. And some of you may have noticed that the banks have been supported for the last 11 years. They've had lower interest rates. In England, like in Europe and America, they're still printing money, and they've had austerity, although austerity with coronavirus at the moment is not really practical. What I want you to do is think back to the 80s when Jeremy Bamber was convicted, and Margret Thatcher was Prime Minister in the UK, and she was fighting a fairly strong economic battle with the miners. And my understanding, my perception is that the miners were digging coal out of the ground at a price higher than what it could be bought for on international markets. So effectively the British economy was supporting the mining industry, and Margret Thatcher wanted to take England on a different course, and she was an exceptionally strong leader, and she had a very important economic task ahead of her, and she was effectively fighting the coal miners for their livelihoods. It was more than right that they fought for their livelihoods, but it was a battle that she had to win for the best economics. Now, her foot soldiers, to put it in a simple way, were the police, and she raised their salary, I think 25% at the time, and she had to be in complete support of police officers in the 80s. Now, obviously, as we know, Jeremy's incident, Bambergate, happened in 1985, and for the police the police were very much supported because of that economic battle that was going on, and Thatcher was a very strong leader, you know. I believe that was one of the crucial soft aspects of why the police had the confidence to basically focus on their perception to the public, and admitting that they had made a mistake, and admitting that they had covered up and screwed up and done a training exercise and some various other things. I think it was a combination of poor leadership, poor decision making, poor proactive considerations to where this might take them, and look where we are 35 years later. It's not really a great situation for the police force. It's a bad story for them, but effectively driven partly by the economics of 1985. So what I try to do now is take you to the economics of today. Now, you've obviously all seen, or some of you have seen, an economic crisis, 2008, a banking crisis, and you saw how quickly that spread through the financial system. You're aware of those financial measures have been in place for 11 years, life support on the banking system. So some of you might be aware that with COVID and the banking crisis and the intervening period that there are life system, you might have actually realised that the banking system and the economy are not as strong as the government are actually telling you. Now, my perception and my own personal finances are very much in preparation for a banking collapse. And obviously this is economically not very good for the UK or any country, France, Germany, America, wherever this spreads to, Italy. And obviously, if you take the Home Secretary at the moment, I'm going to focus more on, not Boris, but Priti Patel, because I think that's more relevant. We're on the precipice of economic changes that probably rival the economic problems that we had in 1985. So, what's this relevant to Jeremy Bamber? Why does it make any difference? Well, the decision then was to protect public confidence in the police at a critical time where they were critical in helping the government keep the structure of society together. Whether you like the police for whatever reason, they perform an absolutely essential job in a properly working society, and do today. And going forward, I think we're headed to even bigger challenges than we had in 1985. So, in the middle of that, if you have Jeremy placing in a submission to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, and the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, who was the MP from Witham, the very area that these events took place, you might not have too much imagination there. You might say, well, yeah, this is not a great time for Jeremy to be sort of requesting, can I have my case reviewed, can I have my evidence reviewed, and can you let me out of prison, which of course by default will show what happened, show that he was framed, and obviously this will damage the confidence in the police and the justice system at a very critical time. What you also see, and there are at the moment very, very strong protests in the UK about a bill that Priti Patel is pushing through. And I think that that's very indicative of what's happening at the moment. They know what's coming, and what they're trying to do is force through very, very, very powerful legislation that will hopefully give them more powers to manage society in the way that they feel it needs managed, with the economic problems that are coming up. So I think that's what I'm trying to sort of link the two together and give you a different perspective. I think that's one of the perceptions that the government have. Now, of course, whether you agree with the bill, that's not what I'm discussing. Whether you, obviously, I would hope that most people watching this channel do not agree that people should be framed, and all those sort of things. But what I'm just trying to do is give you a very, very high helicopter view from the government's side of things. That, Jeremy is not an economic story. He's not like the miners where you say, we simply cannot afford to dig coal out of the ground at a price higher than what we can buy it on the international markets. We can't keep doing this for the economics of UK. Jeremy is not an economic story. He's one guy in prison, and the only thing he represents when he would be released from prison would be a particularly bad story and a loss of confidence in the justice system and the police and their ability and their integrity, and the integrity in the government, that they covered up and things like that. That's what Jeremy is. But I think from the government's perception, what they see coming is problems, and what they're trying to do is begin to get a good grip on society for in preparation of this, hence the bill. I think it's the demonstration, but I forget exactly what the new bill is, but the one that they're all protesting about. And obviously Jeremy, where he fits into that is, this is not a great time. It's not ever a good time, and that's why I think they've always kicked the can down the road with Jeremy. And obviously now Jeremy has new submissions with new evidence, and as always, if you take a look at the case with the evidence, I think most people would agree there are seriously big question marks over the case, and what, as I keep on repeating, most people should say, yeah, now we've got firmly the understanding, like in Hillsborough, if they didn't frame Jeremy, then they would release I think it's the 786788 file, the one that they changed all of the file details to, whilst they were trying to manage the perception of the court case and things like that. So, hopefully, although you might think it's far off track of the evidence and what's going on, hopefully what it's enabled you to do is understand that Jeremy's conviction or Jeremy's framing is not as simple from a government perspective always to make, what we see. We just say, innocent man should be allowed out, guilty man should be in, and that's it. And we don't care how problems the government got. Governments are faced with different circumstances. They're faced with problems maybe not of their making, banking crisis, economic problems, COVID, and my perception is the justice system, the confidence in the police would be vastly improved over the long term if they admitted to what they did. I think it would be a great day for British justice if they were like other industries, like the airlines. We made a plane, we stuck 2 big engines on it, some of them crashed, but man, we're going to put it right and we're going to make this plane an economic success. That's the response that you want, but I don't think governments necessarily are confident or used to working in that direction, and I think their normal approach, Hillsborough, cover it up and kick the can down the road. But hopefully you see it a little bit more from the economic side, and hopefully more people that understand what's going on, hopefully that moves in some way forward a resolution of the standoff between the justice system and the framing of an innocent man for very serious crimes, and effectively the management of the public's perception and things like that. Okay, thanks very much for listening. Hopefully that's been useful and clear and understandable. As I say, it's to do with economics, and thanks very much for tuning in, and hopefully you'll come back again for another episode of Bambergate, the channel that investigates the framing of Jeremy Bamber and how the government might escape or resolve that situation. Thanks very much. Have a good evening.